Good evening, everyone. Peace is at the very core of everything we do in Rotary. In recognition of this fact, the district decided to hold a peace seminar last year when we learned of the link between Rotary and peace in very broad terms. A very warm welcome to the district's second peace meeting this evening to look at, in some detail, the scourge of domestic violence that afflicts our societies. Peace within families eventually leads to peace within communities, nations, and ultimately the world. Where there is peace, there is hope. We have a fine array of speakers tonight to enlighten us on the topic. We'll have the opportunity to hear some personal stories, and we'll learn what Rotary can do to help. There'll be a question and answer session at the end. Please place your questions and comments in the question and answer box, which you have on your screen. I wish to thank Rotarian Janine Birtwistle, who helped me put the program together, past District Governor Val Robinson, and the District Foundation team lead John McGill for their help with publicity, and past District Governor Malcolm Baldwin for the excellent technical help. Before I invite immediate past District Governor Kath Bromelo to tell her Rotary story, I wish to extend a very warm Rotary welcome to a very special guest who is with us this evening. Her name is Paula. Who's Paula? Well, you'll soon find out. By the way, this some program is being recorded. This is for your information. Can I now invite immediate past District Governor Kath to kick off the proceedings, please.
Thank you very much to the guests who have attended tonight. It's really nice for you to take up your time to really come on to a conference like this, which is really beneficial to everybody, especially to Vaz and Janine, who have done amazing work in getting us all here. So my Rotary story, I think a lot of people around the district will already know the story of how I came into Rotary, but I'm going to quickly go through it, and I have the special guest with me tonight who I'm going to ask I'm going to do a question and answer session with her. So I started my life in Leyland in Lancashire, one of 8 children, seven sisters, 1 brother. And my mum and father, they worked in the community. My dad worked at Leyland Motors, one of the engineers there. And so in just getting towards my teenage years, both my parents died. Probably I was around the age of 12. And we all got put into care homes. We all got separated and put into care homes. But I mean, that was an awful kind of thing to do. And we decided as a family, with the help of one of my dad's friends, who was a Rotarian, is since passed away, who was a Rotarian, he was going to get us back together, because after everything that had happened to us, we had the love of each other. And we really, really wanted to stick together. It was really hard. The Rotarian, he fought for us at the council. We got a council house. My older sister was nursing, and she'd just started at Preston Hospital as a nurse. My other sisters were all at different ages, all at different stages of schooling, really. The youngest one was my brother, who was 3 months old. And so eventually we got a house and we all got back together. It wasn't easy. It was really, really hard. We had no money, but money now doesn't have a value to me. I don't think about money at all, because it's the love of the people around you that I value the most. So that could be friends, that could be just people you've met in the street, And it's the family of Rotarians who do so much to help each other. So with this Rotarian and his wife then, and their friends, we learned how to budget ourselves. We'd come home from school, we'd all have jobs to do. We had jobs to do before we went to school. But you could guarantee at the end of the evening, when we were going to bed, there were 7 pairs of socks and knickers on the back of the sofa, clean, ready for going to school the next day. We really, really looked after ourselves. And so we learned how to do things. We learned how to cook for ourselves, how to keep the house clean, and do domesticated things. And in the summer holidays, well, when it got to the October holidays, myself and a couple of my sisters who were old enough, we walked down to the farms at Leyland, because a lot of it was farmland, and we did jobs. So we'd spend the day picking potatoes, so they called it spud picking. Or we'd spend the day beetroot screwing. People laugh at me now when I say I used to be a beetroot screwer. But believe me, that was the worst job I'd ever done. It took all the skin off your hands when you had to pull the beetroots out of the ground and twist the tops off them. And that was a full day's work. We would go down there, set off from our house at 4:30 in the morning, and walk down to the farms. We'd give the farmer's wife a tin of tomato soup, and I don't know if you remember those tin openers that nearly took your hand off, but she'd open the tin, turn it back and put it in the oven. So when you went back at lunchtime on the tractor, then your hot soup would be ready for you, because she'd just put it into the oven and you'd just drink it and then obviously carry on working for the afternoon. And, so all that money went back into what we were doing as a family. We didn't have everything that we would have liked as teenagers. Well, that's what we had. And that's all we needed. So the Rotarian became my role model. And all the time he was working with us, and all the time I knew him, he was the role model that meant so much to me. And so when I came to Carnforth to work during my police service, I was a police officer. I started my police service at Greater Manchester, and some of the domestic violence incidents I went to there were horrendous. I'll mention one or two of them. I went to one house at 6:20 in the morning when we'd got calls of a lady screaming in the street. And when we got there, it was a drug addict's house. So we knew the people in the house, and the male partner, had used a pair of pliers and pulled somebody's teeth out. And so, some of the stuff you see, I know you talk about the victim and, the survivors, I call them. But it was horrendous as a police officer to come away and take your mind off that kind of thing. Another job I went to when a lady and her partner, they had a little baby, and there'd been a lot of domestic calls to the house in Manchester, and she left and threw herself under a train, and you had to go and pick those pieces up. So we had to walk down the rail tracks. I was still young in service and had a couple of my children, and it just really somehow affects you as well. It affects everybody around you, that kind of thing. But anyhow, I came up to Carnforth to work. I was lucky. I changed forces, moved to Carnforth, and I thought it was wonderful. You go along the seafront at Morecambe, and it's beautiful. But at the back of that, the seafront and the houses on the seafront, is a lot of deprivation. And a lot of people in those situations where they haven't got jobs and they're getting on each other's nerves. So that becomes a trigger for domestic violence. you know, and they needed so much support. And then I once went to a house while I was working in Morecambe. In fact, it was in the Cragbank area. And it was Christmas Eve, and I got called to a house because a lady was screaming with a gentleman. Got called to the house, and it was one of the houses with a garden-fronted terrace. It was pitch black. I ran up. I heard her screaming from the car. I ran up the drive, up the pathway to the house, the front door. Up, I opened the front door, and immediately a knife came at me, a serrated knife, which missed me by an inch or two. And he'd already stabbed the lady. And my only thought was, we needed to get her out of the house, which she had a baby in her arms. It was only a couple of weeks old. And my partner went to the window of the house and distracted the male. So he was like showing the knife at the window. I opened the door, I got the lady out of the house, and I've never thrown somebody into the back of a car so fast and then locked the doors, just to really, for her safety and the baby's safety. So she got a cut on, she'd been stabbed in the leg. And at the end of the day, all she wanted to do while I was in the car was to get out. She wanted to go back to him. She wanted to leave the baby with me and go to try and calm him down. But I wouldn't let her. And he got arrested by the armed police, and we went to court with it, and he got 4 years in prison. And I couldn't work out why she wanting to go back to him when he's done that to her. You know, and she just loved him. You know, so and it worked out that she'd moved from, she had 2 children already taken off her in the East Lancs area. She moved to our area, to Carnforth area, and had a baby without the social services knowing. So there was no cross communication or anything like that. So we didn't know anything about this couple, and he'd been in prison before. And so, you know, it's really hard to deal with things like that. Now, tonight, I invited a guest to be with me. She can come on in a second and introduce herself. But about 3 or 4 years ago, just before COVID, myself and a couple of Carnforth Rotarians were going round a housing estate in Carnforth, door to door with the sleigh, which we could do then, which was great. And one of the Rotarians went to speak to a lady who'd come out to speak to the Rotary Club. And when he came back to us, he said, he was buzzing. He was really happy that this lady had come out. It had made his night that this lady had come out to thank us because we'd done something for her. So that went on, and we just went about our normal business. I didn't know this lady at all. And then probably about 3 months ago, a new lady joined our local council. And when she came onto the council, she sent an email, and she was the lady who'd come to talk to the Rotarian. And I would call this lady a survivor, a real survivor, and she's a brilliant person. So I'm going to change seats now, and my guest, Paula, is going to come on. And we're going to do a kind of question and answer session. Now, I know we have to go about 7 o'clock, 10 to 7, something like that. We've got another appointment. But if anybody wants to ask me any further questions, or I pass them to Paula, just give us an email. So it's just a normal email for myself, and I'll pass it on for you. I wish I could see you all. I really do. I've missed going around the clubs. I said to Pam on an email just probably a week ago, Pam, I've not missed all the emails, but I've missed the people, and I really have missed coming and seeing you all. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll pass on to Paula.
Hi, so I'm Paula, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here because it's so nice to be able to talk about something that hopefully my experience could help understand it better and maybe safeguard more women. And even if one person is helped by this, then absolutely whatever it is you guys are doing, keep doing it because it's really, really important. So thank you for having me.
So, Paula, I'm going to ask. I've got a number of questions. I know we might not get through them all, but you're really welcome, and I really meant what I said. I'm really happy that I've met up with you again. Do you think there were reasons that you may have been vulnerable to domestic violence?
Possibly. I think I was quite vulnerable because I've been through domestic violence as a child. So my parents were both abusive, and I think that your psychology is different to most people. So you're so desperate to be loved that you basically just put up with the bad stuff because you're getting the thing you really crave the most, which is love, which you later find out isn't that at all. But
yeah, I can really understand that. It's really nice. What was your abuser like when you met?
Oh, charming. He was 6'3", absolutely beautiful looking 18-year-old boy. Charmed the birds out the trees. He was funny, bit of a bad lad sometimes, but yeah, he was absolutely wonderful.
Oh, sorry. Were there any early indications that your abuser was potentially dangerous? Did you know?
Now, I didn't see them at the time. I do now. Hindsight is a brilliant thing. So, love bombing, where they tell you that they can't be without you. They want to be with you all the time. It's not because they do. It's because they want to make sure you do not to something. Don't wear that kind of clothing because they want you to look a certain way so that men won't look at. And then things like saying that they're insanely jealous when a bloke will chat to you, and so love bombing. I think when I go back.
Right. When did you first question the abuse?
Probably a little after my daughter was born, and things were. There had been abuse, but I didn't recognise it as abuse before then. But we'd been out for a night, and I'd forgotten my key, and he hadn't brought his key. So we had to. So I'm in fits of giggles. I'd had a little bit to drink, but I was in fits of giggles, and all of a sudden he just snapped. He just completely changed. When my son opened the door for us, he threw me through the door, threw me onto the sofa, and just punched me. I couldn't move away. He left, went up the stairs, and I was crying, and I remember screaming after him. That really hurt. And he came back, pulled me up off the sofa by my hair, and said, "That isn't anything. You just wait and see what I can do." And he punched me so hard, I honestly thought he'd snapped the top of my arm. So yeah, and that was when I started to think it's not right.
Was it then at that stage you tried to do something about it?
I tried to talk to him, and the next morning I confronted him, and he was in tears, and I can't believe I've done this to you. He saw the bruising, and he obviously panicked, thinking, "Oh heck, I could be in trouble here." But at that time, still thought I loved him. So coerced and so manipulated by him that he could have and did get away with a lot of things that he should be in prison for.
Oh gosh. What was the thing that finally ended the relationship?
I found out he'd beaten up my daughter. My daughter was 11 at the time, and I thought that in my head I didn't want a broken family like I'd come from. So for me, if I could stay with him until I was 18, until Lizzie was 18, then at least I kept my family together and the kids had their dad with them. But then I came home from somewhere, and my son explained to me that he'd witnessed my daughter being beaten, and then he told me that this was a regular thing and it had happened to him too. So at that point, he was promptly thrown out, but I'd taken him back probably 15 times before that.
When you took him back, why did you take him back?
I honestly believed it was love, and I believed that maybe it was a mental health problem. And if it's a mental health problem, surely some counselling, maybe some medication, it could be fixed, because he wasn't like that when I first met him. He was this charming young man. So I honestly believed it was my fault. I somehow provoked him into being this monster and had to help him get back out of it. So I kept taking him back.
And what support did you get?
At first, very little. My best friend was absolutely brilliant. She was constantly telling me, get away. The police, when they came round, were absolutely wonderful. He was arrested several times. But no, you're so isolated by then. It had been 20 years, so I wasn't allowed to have friends. I obviously didn't have any family of my own. So support was hard there. It was difficult.
How has life changed you and your children? And do you or the children still have, side effects from that time?
Yeah, I suffer with PTSD, anxiety, and occasional depression. I'm personally terrified to go to Lancaster on my own. I can't go to Lancaster because that's where his family's from, and it's not just him that's threatened us. His entire family have disowned all of us, and if we're seen, we just get verbal abuse. I'm terrified of confrontation, so that's not good. My daughter is still going through counselling. My third boy, Matthew, actually tried to kill himself when he was 14 over it all. My two older ones, they seem to be okay. They're doing really well. But since everything's finished with him, my son's now got a beautiful girlfriend, and he lives in a bungalow in Halton, and he acts like a little old man. My son graduated from the Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts in 2021. Matthew, the one that I really did worry about, I really thought he was going to kill himself eventually, is now in his second year at university in Salford. And Lizzie is in her final year of A-levels and hoping to go to Edinburgh University to do neuropsychology next year.
Oh gosh, that's amazing. What a good family.
And I recently got married last year, so I became Paula Gardner.
Oh.
My husband encouraged me to try again as a florist, because I have had a florist before, but my ex bankrupted it. He stole all the money for drugs and alcohol. But my husband said, no, you need to do this. And we've been there, like Gardner, I have to be a florist, really.
Oh, that's really nice. And you've opened up the shop at Calvert,
Opened
which
the
is
shop,
brilliant.
doing really well. Met a lot of fantastic people.
What made you come out to see the Rotary that night when you spoke to that gentleman, the Ken on?
Because at that point, I think we were probably 2 years after the ex had left, and we were in such a good place. I mean, when the Rotary came round, the reason I wanted to thank him is there was a year, I think it was about 2016, we were in the middle of the domestic violence, and it was getting to its worst point. We had no food. My ex-husband, took all the money for food and spent it on cannabis and cocaine and alcohol. We didn't have enough money to keep the electric on all the time. And there was this one Christmas where I'd managed to hide £25 for Christmas, and we couldn't afford food. And the Rotary came past and gave my kids a tangerine. This is when they still believed in Santa. And they gave all the kids a tangerine. And I think we got a tin of biscuits or something like that. There was a little hamper came to the door. No idea how the Rotary knew about me, but it just completely changed things. And when I saw Ken a few years later, I just needed to say, look, you made such a difference to my family that night. You don't know how big a gift that tangerine was.
That's lovely.
It really changed everything that Christmas.
Thank you so much for coming. You're really brave, honestly. I mean, it's really awful because you can't see all the people. They'd love to see you, I'm sure. But it's really, you are a survivor. You have done so well. Your family have done so well.
Yeah,
you should be really proud of what you've done. Yeah. And we really appreciate you talking. Well, that's the end of our session tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's a couple of things, really. The way I had the role model to start my life off was absolutely amazing. And I know that there's people listening tonight, you are all role models. And if you can just take one thing away, that when you've done something good for somebody, they'll remember you. And you know, you're all really important. And just as Paul has just said, you know, we only gave a tangerine and a tin of biscuits or a little hamper, but you know, it's made a difference. You remembered the Rotary and came back looking for us. So if you can just take that away, that's brilliant. We've not got time for any questions and answers from yourselves, but if anybody would like to speak to us, just give us a call. That, you know, just give me a call or drop me an email, and I'll get back to you. But thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic evening, and I'm sure you will do with Pam.
Thank you very much, Kath and Paula. That was really very interesting. Thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best with your next meeting. Well,
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
It gives me great pleasure now to invite past District Governor Steve Cartwright to talk to us about the Christmas toy boxes. Past District Governor Cartwright is the RGBI coordinator for Kids Out, and he's going to talk about this Rotary Christmas boxes. And I've been thinking about it. I think these boxes perhaps could come in handy where children who come from families, you know, suffering from domestic violence could be given these toy boxes because they won't get left out. Or if you have refugees in your community, anyway. I think I'll let Steve explain more. Steve.
That's great, Vas. Thank you for the brief introduction there. Let's have a go at making sure we can share the screen. Lovely. Okay. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you for the invite. Yeah. Okay. I'm talking to you about Kids Out. Yes, I'm the Rotary GBNI Kids Out coordinator, which effectively means that I try to bring together all the strings of contacts within each district and work with and in partnership with the Kids Out Fun and Happiness charity. The pictures, I'm sure those of you who are long-standing Rotarians will be aware of what that is, i.e. normally the National Rotary Kids Out Day. But it's more than that. I mean, just a brief history for those of you who don't know, and I will get to the salient point in a minute. The Kids Out charity itself was actually started, or the Kids Out Day, as most Rotarians know, was started by Rotarians in 1990. So it's been going for over 30 years. And traditionally, on an annual basis, we've tried to encourage as many children as possible from a lesser background, particularly those from a mental and physical disability, and also young carers, to enjoy a day out which ordinarily they probably wouldn't all have the opportunity to experience. So that's what we call it, and it is branded the National Rotary Kids Out Day, and we try to have that on the second Wednesday in June where possible. It's not always possible to have it on that day, but we do aim for that for maximum PR impact. And during this year, June 2023, we hit just over 20,000 children. That's 20,000 children, which is one heck of a lot. But our record is nearer 30,000 pre-COVID. But I want to move on to the second project that we in Rotary, or Rotary Kids Out, get involved with, and is pertinent to what we're talking about this evening, which is the Rotary Christmas Toy Box Initiative. Now, this came about during the COVID period, where Kids Out, the charity, and I'm going to talk about what Kids Out do here. Kids Out, the charity, they went to change to charity in 1999 as a standalone charity, and essentially to devote more time, 24/7 support to domestic violence refugees throughout Rotary GBNI. So this work goes on behind the scenes, not always or necessarily involving Rotary clubs. It's sort of a silent service in a lot of way, because of course we can appreciate when we're talking of women's aid refugees primarily, albeit there are single parent far the refugees about as well. Their location has to be necessarily kept relatively secret in order not to compromise where they are and having to change venue. So the Kids Out charity itself, so the charity, it's not just about having a great day out, which us in Rotary do. That's our main thrust, our main aim, and that's what we go for every June. So the Kids Out charity, they are supporting those single parent families with that are resident in domestic violence refuges and work closely with local government childcare services. And just to reiterate, I do keep reiterating this because it can be sometimes confusing when we talk of Women's Aid refuges and refugees. I wish to make it clear here, we are talking of refugees and not Ukraine, Afghan, or whatever other refugees. That is not part of the general remit of Kids Out. So therefore, we are looking at, with Kids Out, the charity, of which I am also a trustee, in helping over 450 Women's Aid or domestic violence refugees around Rotary GBNI, excluding Southern Ireland. And that equates to approximately 5,300 children in all these refugees at any one time. That figure can go up to about 5,700, 5,800 over a Christmas period. So when we talk about Rotary getting involved with Kids Out, yes, I've mentioned already the Kids Out Day, which most of us know, but we also brought into play 2 years ago, this will be the third year, the Rotary Christmas Toy Box Initiative. I'll come on to that in a minute. But to reiterate what Kids Out, the charity, do behind the scenes, I want to just highlight what they were doing during the COVID period, a stressful period all round. Okay, this obviously compounded domestic violence because, of course, the close proximity, people are on lockdown and so on. Now, Kids Out took the opportunity of using this time to contact all the refugees to find out how else Kids Out, the charity, could help those particular locations. So the outcome of this was the fact that they could, first of all, they helped to provide free Wi-Fi at refugees. They also provided 2 desktop, laptop or PCs at the refuge. It's no use having Wi-Fi if you haven't got the platform in which to use it. They also provided various monetary food vouchers per refuge family. They wouldn't normally do so, but this was during COVID. And the reason why the Kids Out took this on over and above what they normally do is because during their contact with all the refugees, 42% did not have any Wi-Fi access. 78% had no TV. Think about it, 78% no TV and 49% no access to any PC equipment. So when you leave your home, the domestic home, fleeing from violence at a moment's notice, ending up taking your children or as a child going to a strange town, strange place, strange house, strange people, minimal facilities, no TV, well, hey, I'm sure we can all work out. I think I'd rather slip my wrists in some, pardon the expression. Obviously, this was dire times here, and Kids Out were there to help them out. But so, moving on to what we in Rotary have done for them in the past 2 years in supporting Kids Out. We instigated what we call the Rotary, notice the block capitals underline, the Rotary Christmas Toy Box Initiative in partnership with Kids Out, with a strapline, every refuge, every child. And the idea of this was that we would hopefully supply every child in refuge, 450 plus refugees, over 5,000 children, with an individual Rotary branded toy box. Each toy box filled by age and gender. It was not one toy box fits all. In each of these toy boxes, there are over £80 worth of new toys, which was specified by Kids Out. Now, the reason why they're specified by Kids Out is because Kids Out undertook surveys to find out what children of age and gender would like to play with at that time. So they knew the toys they included in these boxes for a boy aged 6 or a girl aged 8. The toys that were in there, they knew those from the surveys that generally those children would want to play with the toys that were in those boxes. Kids Out, for their part, because of their 24/7 contact with the refugees, provide all the data and deliver the toy boxes. So there was no need for Rotary clubs or Rotarians to get involved, asking awkward questions locally. Where's the nearest refuge? How many kids have you got? And so on. Kids Out would provide all of that, and therefore, which was then filtered down via myself, such that they would also deliver the toy boxes on Rotary's behalf. I'll reiterate, there was no need for direct contact with the refuge by Rotary clubs, appreciating, of course, that some clubs do work very closely with some refugees. In return, we were asking clubs to donate £25 per child per Rotary Christmas toy box to Kids Out. So if there were 10 children residing in a local refuge to the club, then that would be £250. And to say, yes, in sending a donation for £250 directly to Kids Out, they would deliver it in time for Christmas. Each of the toy boxes would be marked a Christmas present from your local Rotary club, so they are Rotary branded. In 2022, i.e. last year, over £75,000 was donated by Rotary clubs within Rotary GBNI, which equates to, well over 3,100 Rotary Christmas toy boxes. An absolutely fantastic achievement. We'd love to get over 5,000, but it's a matter of getting the word out. It's all easy done. The clubs can register online via kidsout.org.uk. And information will be circulated shortly via Rotary GBNI and your Rotary District Kids Out ambassador. Unfortunately, your District 1190 does not have an ambassador at the moment, but we'll worry about that shortly. The point is, now is the time to start thinking about this. I have the information to provide for inquiry only, where your nearest refuge location would be, and an indicative number of children. You have to bear in mind, of course, that there are 450 refugees and there are, well, I don't know, about 1,600 Rotary clubs. So we're not expecting one Rotary club to cover everything at the nearest refuge on their own, if there are neighbouring clubs as well. We hope the Rotary clubs could split the donation to ensure they're all covered. Inner city areas, particularly, of course, there's quite a lot of Rotary clubs and equally a lot of refugees as well. The point about the importance here is the fact that we are supplying a toy box. Now you might think, hang on, I think a toy box is a bit of a derogatory term. I suppose you are, but wait, hang on a minute, you're there in a refuge, not knowing what's going to happen from day to day. So better than, hang on, is Santa going to be here? I don't know. Is he going to call? Am I going to get a present? Can my mother or my single parent father, can they afford to purchase any presents? And will they be new presents? Are they presents that I want? And here we have ready-made, for the sake of £25 a child, a toy box with over £80 worth of toys, typically shown in that box. All this work is done by Rotary, by Kids Out. Indeed, down at their Luton warehouse, over 400 hours of service was provided by local Rotarians in physically packing these toy boxes on the build-up to Christmas. So I think this is quite pertinent here from what we've heard earlier on in the meeting, and the fact it's going forward into refuges, and we're hoping that we can get over 4,000 boxes, £100,000 donated by Rotary clubs on the lead up to Christmas to help the situation. I'll give you a brief oversight here. I appreciate time is of the essence. If you've got any questions, well, yes, here I am. I know we haven't got time for that. But please, if you want me to, you've got more questions, you want to know how to do about it, you want information, you want the details, which I'm sure you will, because yes, unfortunately, District 1190 does not have a Rotary District Kids Out ambassador, unlike the other, well, the majority of the remaining 23 districts in Rotary GBNI. So you'll have to make do with me as your main point of contact and I will do all I can. Yes, I will get as much as I can circulated via your district newsletter.
Thank you. Thanks ever so much, Steve. That's absolutely brilliant. We Rotary Christmas toy boxes are fantastic and so relevant to what we're talking about tonight. So you've got all of Steve's details there, and hopefully somebody will volunteer and become one of your ambassadors.
If the DG's still here, I would ask, please, if the DG or could at least put the word out. Because
we need to move on, Steve. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Janine. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you very much, Steve. That was very informative. I know time is getting on, so I think we better move on. So I'll now invite Chris Harris to talk about domestic abuse and violence against the person. Together we can change the story. Chris, please.
I'm just trying to share my presentation with you. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, my name is Chris Harris. I'm a partnership manager for a very small domestic abuse charity based in Broxtowe. For those of you that don't know that, that's in Nottinghamshire, and we sit in Rotary District. I understand 1220. I'm not a Rotarian. We began a journey around 3 years ago working with Beeston Rotary post the first wave of COVID, looking at raising awareness of domestic abuse within businesses. So my job primarily is around going around businesses and companies and saying, how do you support your staff? How do you support your volunteers? And how do you then support your service users? So slightly different to the other aspects that you've seen here this evening. As part of that, we also are a White Ribbon accredited organisation, and White Ribbon very much looks at violence against women and girls. But my message to you all is that we need to understand that domestic abuse and violence against the person can happen to anybody who identifies in any way that they prefer to identify. And this year, the message that we are using for White Ribbon is that we can change the story. And so my messages for you are, how can Rotary think about changing the story? The message that we've heard from Paula obviously was very pertinent, and one of the things that's really important to me is that every piece of work that I do is based in the voices of the service users that I work with day in and day out. Obviously, I'm still currently practicing within a domestic abuse organisation. I met the Rotarians from both Beeston and from the district as part of an exhibition that we put on at the National Justice Museum. And the hashtag for that was "Don't Judge Me." And so many people do judge people that experience domestic abuse. So many people have a preconceived idea of who experiences domestic abuse. And in the talks that I've been lucky enough to do with Rotary clubs around the district, there has been some of those preconceived ideas that it doesn't happen in our area, it doesn't happen in this age group, it doesn't happen to people outside of an intimate partner relationship. So our exhibition challenged some of those ideas, and as part of that, we worked very closely with a group of journalism students to look at some of the sensational stories that appear in the press to try to change those views. And the exhibition included the mannequin that you can see here, that was part of the work that was put together by our service users, and this poem. And I'd like you just to take 2 seconds to read that poem. I think one of the issues is that we do judge. we all judge, we all have these ideas. And I think one of the things that we've talked about an awful lot in the last 3 years as this project has progressed, and we've had huge support from Janine, who's on the call tonight, to take this further, is that actually what we want to do is take away those preconceived ideas, and we want to look about how we can make a difference and how we can change things. Steve, through his Kids Out messages, spoke very clearly about the wonderful work that Rotary is doing. But what Rotary is doing with those is working with refugees. We work in an area where there isn't a refuge. We work in an area where the people that we move into accommodation, where they walk through the front door and there is absolutely nothing. They don't get a package that is delivered to them as part of their arrival. And they don't get packages delivered to them at Christmas unless we go out and do some work locally to support those people. So I have challenged Rotary, both locally and nationally, with these 3 messages. Why is it relevant for you as a Rotary club? I think we need to challenge the stereotypes. I think we need to recognise that domestic abuse happens everywhere, and we need to agree what actions we want to take. There is also a much broader agenda, the agenda which is the violence against women and girls, or against the person. So we're talking about things like stalking, we're talking about things like harassment, we're talking about harassment via social media and the huge problems that there are around at the moment there. We're talking about things like post-separation abuse and the long-term effects on the family. And Paula alluded to that. It doesn't stop when you walk out. It goes on for many years after that. And what is the long-term effects on the children that are in those families in those situations? So we need to look at what the national and local initiatives are. And we need to also look at support for people who are experiencing domestic abuse within their family situation. And indeed, within some of the talks that I've given, family members have stood up and said, I may be a grandparent, I may be an aunt, but I have actually got responsibility for those children. And those children talk to me about what's happened to them, and I don't know what to say. So one of the wishes that Janine and I have is that we can actually look at how can we put something together that does support Rotarians who come forward and say, this is happening in my family, and what can we do locally to get some help and support. Some of the steps we would urge you to take, and the very simple steps are, understand what is in your local area. What is in your local area? What is in your district? Don't just think about refugees. What other services are there, and how could you support them? For every Rotarian to have some signposting information to every agency supporting females, males, the LGBT community, children, would be wonderful. If you could say, when somebody spoke up, I've got a number that I can give you. And also to raise awareness. How do you raise that awareness? How do you make sure that people keep this on the agenda and keep talking about it? And it's not an easy subject to bring up, so it's something that you need to feel more comfortable about as you go through talking about this in your area. We are recommending 3 information sources to you, or 3 actions that you can take. The first one is that the Bright Sky app is an app that you can all download for free. On that app, it gives you a lot of information around domestic abuse and sexual abuse services. And there is a locator on there that you can put your postcode in, and it will tell you your local services for females, for males, for children. And it's something that you can have available with you all the time to give you those useful numbers that you need. The second is the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse, or as it's commonly known, IDA. When Beeston started this journey 3 years ago, they joined as an IDA member. They were the first ever Rotary club to join as an IDA member, because IDA is usually around people who have employees, and Rotaries traditionally don't, unless it's in the sort of the higher scale of Rotaries. And they're very proud that what they do locally as a very, very small Rotary club is to try to raise awareness with local employers around domestic abuse policies and procedures to support their staff. And then the third action is White Ribbon. As I said, we are a White Ribbon accredited organisation. We were the first domestic abuse organisation in the country to achieve that status. And we sit on steering groups advising other people about why White Ribbon is important, but also around why, if you go for White Ribbon accreditation or for supporter status, don't forget that why you're doing it is because of the people like Paula that spoke tonight, the people that I support day in, day out, and that we should never forget about the individuals and what they're experiencing. You'll note that through my presentation, I use the word abuse. We don't use the word violence anymore because people don't recognise that if they're not experiencing violence, then they are in an abusive relationship. And not all relationships are physically abusive. In fact, these days, the most common form of abuse is controlling behaviour associated with finance and economic abuse, which, as you can understand in the current climate, is something that people may not recognise that they are experiencing abuse, but need our support just as much as people who are being physically abused. So what are we doing? District 1220 have decided that they will sign up as supporter organisations for White Ribbon, and that they will sign up people to become ambassadors, which are male ambassadors who will then stand up and say that they don't agree with violence against women, and also champions, which are females who will champion the messages that are out there. White Ribbon Day is the 25th of November every year. This year's theme, as I say, is change the story. How can we change the story? What can we do to make a difference? However, what I've encouraged our supporter organisations in our district to do is that we don't, everybody doesn't do something on the 25th of November. So we are spreading that. So Beeston are doing something, they're having a church service that they're running at the beginning of November. Belper and Duffield are having an open awareness day for members in the area with all associated domestic and sexual violence clubs to come along to talk to them in October. There is lots and lots of things that they can do. Nottingham City Rotary are doing hugs in a mug, which is really providing people with a mug with some drinks in it, so that when they walk into that house the day that they've had to flee, they can make themselves a cup of tea on the first day. It's very simple stuff. It's not big stuff, but it's stuff that you can consider. Is it things that you could do in your area? These are the 4 national helplines, and I'm hoping that these slides will be circulated to you afterwards, but the links to these are in the notes pages of the slides if they are sent out to you. But obviously you've got the 4 national helplines there that you can refer to. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And really from tonight, I hope that you can take away that there are lots of small things that a Rotary Club can do. It's not about large messages. It's not about large changes. We see this as being a extended 3-year project, hopefully, where we can make a difference. And I know that Janine is going to talk more closely about what she feels that Rotary can directly do to help to move this message forward. So thank you very much indeed for inviting me along this evening, and I hope that's given you a bit of an overview, and hopefully we've also got a little bit more back on track with time. So there you go, back over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm very conscious about the time, so in view of that, I'll go straight to Les Hardy and ask him to talk about the current situation in Cumbria and Lancashire as far as domestic violence is concerned. Les.
Thank you, Vas. Good evening to everyone. Just very quickly, my background is both working and being a magistrate in East Lancashire, and I was one of the first domestic violence court chairmen. So my experience, among many other things, has been to work closely with those who work in the domestic violence field. And I have been doing this now for the best part of 40 years. It's very close to my heart, and I've learned a lot of lessons. And very much like Kath was talking about earlier on, some of the things that we see in court, and of course we are privileged to a lot of forensic stuff as well as the verbal, but they are deeply disturbing. And I was struck by what Chris was just saying. We must not forget that you cannot identify people who are experiencing any form of domestic abuse. There isn't a big sticker on the head that says, I'm a victim. And in fact, many do not realize they are victim. And I'm also struck by the general experience of denial. I dealt with one lady, 57 occasions the police had been called and started proceedings before she finally assisted. There is this incredible bond of love. So how do you tackle it? Chris has described what happens in one area, and of course it's very important to realize that not all areas are the same, far from it. It's also important to recognize that women's services and support generally has been a roller coaster of funding. When I first started 20 odd years ago with the local domestic violence forum, the funding just wasn't there at all. What this has done is create a sort of mix, which is both local authority and voluntary. So I'm just going very quickly to point out what is available in the two parts of our district, and it is a massive district. I think it's about 5,500 square miles, so it's very, very substantial. You will come across a lot of denial. I remember being told very clearly, rural areas do not have any domestic violence issues. Well, I'm sorry, they do. I used to chair the commissioning for drugs and alcohol, and one of the areas that I was dealing with was very rural. But my goodness me, the problems with drink, isolation, and what goes on behind closed doors, because that was the attitude of the police in the early 90s. They are just domestics. And of course, sadly, we are seeing evidence of that still continuing. For those of you in Cumbria, there is a very handy Cumbria County Council information sheet. It's called Staff and Elected Members. And it's part of Safer Cumbria Partnership. And it sets out in just a few sentences both a national context and the achievements of the last 6 years. And just to demonstrate how variable provision is, Cumbria is, of course, going through significant changes. But I'll read you one line. Cumbria County Council and its partners have achieved significant organisational change, and this has happened just in the last 6 years, and that tells you something about the differential of provision. There is a network of domestic violence champions and a description of what you can see as signs of domestic violence. The big caution I'd urge on everyone is one important skill that is necessary for dealing with any form of domestic violence or even thinking about it. Your listening skills are vital. Don't go in with both feet. You can do a lot of damage. talk to the professionals first. People like Chris are very important. You can follow up that very easy to read elected members sheet. In Cumbria, there is in West Cumbria, the Freedom Project. Now that domestic violence support, and it is called domestic violence there, is focused on the police and the law. And of course, there is an important issue here. With 2 women a week on average killed, it is inevitable that there will be legal matters. As you heard from Paula, custodial sentences are now being given out. And that does mean, in law terms, there are victims. Cumbria has victim support, and they provide independent domestic violence advisors, frequently called IDVAs. They are professionals, it's a free service, so you start to build up a picture of county council and local initiatives. The Freedom Project is really quite substantial, but it's part of this, what I referred to earlier on, as Cumbria's Domestic Abuse Partnership. And again, it's a very extensive partnership. Don't think your area doesn't have support. Allerdale, Barrow Women's Community, the Borough Council, Carlisle, all of them are part, even the housing associations. And again, that is a common feature of both Lancashire and Cumbria, in that because so much housing now is provided by organisations that are no longer local government, but act on behalf of providing what we used to call council housing, they become involved, and that's very, very important. In addition, there are a lot of support organisations identified on the police website, so that's worth bearing in mind.
Les, I'm sorry to interrupt, but running a bit late, so it would be grateful if you could.
Yeah, I was told 10 minutes. I was trying to keep it to 10 minutes.
Yes, sorry, go on.
Lancashire, likewise, there is an overarching Lancashire County Council framework of Safe for All, which is a county-wide helpline, and a lot of work done on behalf of the County Council by the Emily Davison Centre in East Lancs. Calico Housing, one of the groups I'm talking about, provides SafeNet, and Harve, Hyndburn and Ribble Valley, domestic abuse, do a tremendous amount of work. I know Vaz has drawn it to an end. It's unfortunate, but there is a substantial amount. The important thing to say is this: you can make contact with these services, seek advice, and take it step by step. But please do not believe there is no need in your area. It is completely the wrong approach to take. And I think that message should come through loud and clear. So I shall curb my talking there. And if anyone wants these contacts, if they'll contact Vaz, I'll do a mail out to all those, either for Lancashire or for Cumbria. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Vaz. Thank you to all the speakers that we've had so far. Some really heartbreaking personal stories there. And it's really important what Les was saying about the local context. You need to understand what is happening in your area. I'm going to do a whistle stop tour because it's really important that there's time for you to also answer your questions. So if you've got any further questions, please put them in the Q&A and we will make sure that they are covered. So just very quickly, I'm Janine Birtwistle and I'm the Rotary Great Britain and Ireland Specialist Advisor Team Lead for the Humanitarian Service Team, which basically covers pretty much everything where you roll up your sleeves and do. So we're here to help you to do things that are needed and relevant in your communities today, and also to build resilience for tomorrow. And I'm so pleased that we're here talking today about peace in our community. There are 4 other specialist advisor teams in Great Britain and Ireland, and we're all here to support the work. And I'm not going to go through it from a time perspective, but we are all here working together and collaborating, getting out of our silos and seeing how we can actually do more by sharing expertise and skills. Each area or each cluster, and here you've got a team member, Anne Sutcliffe is a member of the Humanitarian Service Team, and she looks after the cluster of North of England and North Wales, and obviously 1190 is part of that. We are about that supporting. We're here to support clubs, hubs, districts, clusters, basically the whole of Rotary Great Britain and Ireland, including all the outlying bits like Guernsey, where I'm from, or Gibraltar or elsewhere. It's one region, and that by working together as one region, one vision and one Rotary, that we can actually achieve the vision statement that Rotary has for us all. Because as a global organisation, we see a world together where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, in ourselves. And I think it should be the other way around, because I think being a Rotarian, being part of making a difference, being with a community of friends is actually where it all starts. But I don't think it's just about together that we can create change. I think it's together we can create peace. And peace really does start within each and every one of us as individuals, in our families, in our clubs, do I dare say it. And if we look at the action plan that we all have, Rotary International in Great Britain and Ireland, we need for Rotary to have a bigger impact, to be able to expand the reach to more people, to get more people involved and engaging with Rotary, and we need to be able to adapt. And some of the things that you've heard about tonight are totally relevant to this. And you are going to hear over the course of the next 3 years and beyond about 3 unifying themes that we're working with within Humanitarian Service Team, but also all of the teams together. And it's about health and well-being, future generations, and rebuilding lives, rebuilding communities. And all of those are absolutely relevant to domestic abuse and violence against the person, although we are sitting it in the health and well-being unifying theme. And we're pulling together groups of people with specialist interests and expertise. So that's why, for instance, you've heard from Chris tonight. She's not a Rotarian, she's an expert. You've heard from Paula. She's not a Rotarian, she's a survivor of domestic abuse. We need to be using the power of our networks and our connections to reach out more. But we also need to stop and pause and look at ourselves, our own families, our own clubs. What are we doing around domestic abuse and violence against the person? We've got lots of ideas from what's already been suggested. But for me, we're going to have what we call a theme opportunity team, or a TOT, around domestic abuse and violence against the person. We've got almost everybody in place for that team, and it's a complete mix of people. But what we want you as Rotarians to be doing is talking about domestic abuse and violence against the person, talking to each other, talking to your communities, talking to the specialists in your communities, talking to some of the organisations that Chris and Les have highlighted this evening. It's about listening. What are your needs in your community? Chris's area doesn't have a refuge. Does your area? What is the need in your community? Oh, domestic violence, domestic abuse, domestic violence and abuse, violence against a person. None of it happens in our area. I live in the very peaceful island of Guernsey. I had a very, very difficult upbringing. I had a very loving family. However, there was a lot of violence around me. I was raped by a family friend when I was 12 on a family holiday. I didn't tell anybody, not a living soul, about that till I was 27. At the time, I was in the police. It was long before there were things like domestic abuse training or how do you actually look after things. I was in a police force with very few women. Women were a novelty in the force, and they thought you had to deal with all things around domestic arguments, abuse, violence, incest, and all the rest of it. It was only during one of the very few training courses that we actually had around this that I realised that I was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Today, I still suffer. Every day, I don't know how I'm going to wake up. Every day, I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer the phone. But I have overcome it a lot of the time. 99.9% of the time. Not only have I overcome what's happened to me, but I've actually used it. I've used it in my police service. I've used it in fostering many, many, many children, often coming from homes where there has been some form of abuse, some form of violence. I've used it in my skills in dealing with other victims of other violence. Do I dare say it? I've used it in the arrangements that I do and the way that I work in Rotary. Somebody in your club is suffering domestic abuse in some way. The statistics show that they do. Sadly, someone in your club might be a perpetrator. Talk to people. Just give them the opportunity to say what they want to say. It doesn't have to be around this. Just raise the subject. You know, Chris has given you the idea about the White Ribbon Day. Sadly, often it is the girls and the women that this is the most prevalent for. But it can be anybody of any gender and of any age. And don't forget, it happens to people even in their 70s or 80s or 90s. Just because statistics stop when you're 75, it doesn't mean the abuse stops. And also, as Chris also highlighted, we are looking at how can we help Rotarians and family of Rotary so that when they become aware of somebody in their family or close to them, they have some idea of how to help, where to signpost them to, how to talk to them, how to listen, how to take action. Our president this year, from our very own beautiful body Scotland, Gordon McAnally, has given us 3 presidential initiatives, and they all are linked in one way or another to domestic abuse and violence against a person. Prioritising mental health, the struggles that people go through, not just when they are abused. It doesn't end then. It goes on in one form or another for the rest of their lives. It goes on in the children who may not have suffered abuse in an abusive household. They might not have suffered it directly, but actually, under English law now, they are also victims of abuse. Peace building through connections. What you're doing by reaching out to the organisations in your community that are already involved in this arena. Find out what the needs are, where are the gaps, can you bring people together, use your skills, and please don't forget the Empowering Girls initiative started 2 years back from President Sheikha Mehta, continued by last year's President Jennifer Jones, and absolutely continuing under Gordon McAnally. It's about unleashing the potential of boys and girls, whatever the gender, unleashing the potential of everyone. And one of the biggest hurdles to unleashing potential is what goes on behind those closed doors. Please, I haven't got time to go into too much detail because I want to give you the opportunity to put any further questions that you may have into the Q&As, or to actually have a chance to hear answers to those questions from Chris, and I'm not sure if Steve, I think he has left us now, but Les is still here, because that local perspective and what can you do is really, really important. So I don't know if you could bring the others back onto the screen as well, please, Malcolm. But there was one question. We've only got 2 questions actually in the Q&As, and I'd love to have some more questions from you so that we've only got a few more minutes, but let's make those valuable minutes. So Anthony, you asked about Paula and whether she'd been invited to join Rotary. Well, Kath and Paula are obviously no longer with us now, but I do know from a very amazing chat that I had with Paula, a Zoom call that I had with her last week, that she is too busy right now to join Rotary. I don't know if her district have asked her to join Rotary. Kath, I'm sure, will probably have asked her to join Rotary. I did. She's too busy. However, what I have asked her to do is if she would be interested in helping us with the TOT, the Domestic Abuse and Violence Against the Person TOT. And with her experience, with her role now as a local councillor and involved with the family and the impact that it's had on them, she will be a valuable member of a TOT because it's a group of people collaborating together. What are you doing in your club, in your group, your assistant governor group? What are you doing in your district, or do I dare say in your cluster? Talk to others and network with them, get them involved. There's then a question for Elizabeth, and I think I'd like if Chris and Les would like to answer on this. We start with Chris. This is from Elizabeth. When will all the partners, so here she's referring to social services, police, NHS, local district councils, communicate or share information regarding domestic violence in their area? She's been a councillor whose responsibility was domestic violence, and she's so concerned that it often ends in a domestic homicide. Sadly, the statistics do show that. And then they all come together to do the domestic homicide review. But that doesn't really help the person that's died, does it? So, Chris, any thoughts from you on that?
I'm going to say, Janine, that obviously, again, that's very area specific in terms of what happens within each district. Within our area, we do have regular meetings. We do get together and we do talk about cases. And we've got quite a robust set of meetings that are led by our district council that allow us to do that. But as I say, it is really very specific to your area and what might happen. And because I'm not in that area, I can't answer that question specifically for you. I do agree that you don't want it to reach the stage where you're meeting around the table is about a domestic homicide. But maybe Les has got more local information than I have on that.
Thank you,
Yes,
Chris.
you're right. You're right, Chris. It is very area specific. And the lady who asked the question is also very right in what she does. There should be a coming together. I chaired and authored a domestic homicide review. And one of the things that was quite clear was organisations do not talk to each other. There is a lack of agreement about what should be regarded as the key factors about risk and so on. There's lack of agreement, there's not following protocols. It's very, very complex. And when you start a homicide review, it reveals all these things. There is a lot of tension between the police and the security of their information, the health service and their total obsession with individuality and the right of their patients to secrecy and so on. But there's also a broader perception that they're the professionals and nobody else counts. And it's very important that there are things called, there's a load of acronyms here, but basically there are structures which bring people together, but they bring people together at crisis points, not at the time where they should be in advance taking preemptive action. But they're all stretched. They're terribly stretched. And you are quite right. Everybody wishes they'd come together. Social services are stretched to the absolute limit. Some of them are operating on 50 cases per person. It's a huge workload, is that. The care facilities.
Thank you.
It's very, very complex, but you're right in what you say.
Thank you very much. I think it's really important what they've both highlighted. You know, it is dependent on your local area and what's going on there. And please, please talk to people, connect with people. One of the strengths of Rotary is that we've got a complete mix of people involved in our clubs. And I'm delighted, Arthur, to see that you're president of, I assume, Paula's local club, and you've asked her to visit the club at any time. That's absolutely fantastic. So thank you for that. But, you know, find out what the local situation is for you. We're running out of time, but there are two other questions. If we could just have a very quick answer, please, from you, Chris, on this one. I apologise for pronunciation. Sunu would like to know about the various types of domestic abuse to recognise in families that you're aware of. So really, she's looking for a definition. I'm sorry, I'm being presumptuous. I don't actually know what gender they are. Definition of domestic abuse, please.
Okay, right. Yeah, I've quickly brought that up for myself. The current domestic abuse definition, as put down in law in England, as Janine quite rightly points out, is any incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive or threatening behaviour, violence or abuse. And that's the way that it is defined, but then it's broken down into emotional and psychological abuse, which I have to say happens in all cases. You cannot have any abuse without those things happening. Physical abuse, but remember what I said, that doesn't happen in all of the cases. Financial and economic abuse, sexual abuse, harassment and stalking, and online or digital abuse, which currently we are having a massive rise in, which has happened really as a result of COVID. So hopefully, I mean, that's a very quick answer, but hopefully that gives you an idea that it is a much broader thing than just thinking about physical violence.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Chris. And for me, it's not, people often when they say domestic abuse, they are thinking domestic violence, that black eye, that pushing them down the stairs, that whatever. It is so much more than that. And I think Paula may have given you some indication of some of the things that she suffered from as far as domestic abuse is concerned. It can be so much, and it could be just simple as financial abuse, not ever giving somebody money. And you know, that's a skill Rotarians could help survivors who have had to move out, who have never had access to any money themselves. They don't have a clue what to do. How do you open a bank account? How do you balance the books? How do you pay your rent? How do you? Speak to your local providers, speak to your local services to see how you could help in your area. We need to be moving on to close. And I just want to, it's really a comment, I think, really from Anthony, is the new Greatest Hits Radio in Cumbria and Carlisle. It took over from CFM Radio. It must mean something to you all. It's got a Cash for Kids and Mission Christmas already in place. And from advertising on it, they seem to be going national. And we need to find out whether their reaching out to refugees. So yes, absolutely, but don't forget the Rotary Christmas Toy Box initiative. I'm sure that Steve would be really delighted if clubs across your district got behind that. There were some details in the last Humanitarian Service Team newsletter. Please, on the 17th of the month, a plea from me, every Rotarian with an email address receives from the Rotary Support Centre the service news. It's got headlines from each of the service teams, the specialist advisor teams. Please read the bit from Humanitarian Service Team, click on the links, find out more, because that's where you're going to see more things around this and so many other aspects. So thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Les. I think we need to shut up so that Vaz can round us off. Thank you so much for being part of this.
Thanks to all of you. Thank you very much. We'll swiftly move on to our District Governor, Pam, for her closing remarks and observations. Pam.
I am with you. Have I? Yep, there you go. Brilliant. Wow, goodness me, what an incredible evening. I've been asked to sum up and give thanks. I hadn't talked to Janine before this evening, but other than Janine's personal story, everything that Janine talked about is what was in my summing up. So I think every guest, every speaker has given you something to take away with you. Kath, Paula and Janine talked about personal stories and shared real life stories about what happens to people. Steve and Chris talked about us thinking about how we can help, how can we raise awareness, how do we consider that wider agenda, and how do we support those living in those abusive circumstances. And then Les and Janine shared some really critical information around who we can speak to get that information and how we can draw that together. And I think I also want to thank our audience for listening. I know we can't see you, but from the questions that have come through, thank you so much for being part of it. And I would say, if you have any questions that you didn't want to pose on the live session, please send them through to Vaz, who will share them with the appropriate person. But we talk about create hope in the world, which is good, and McAnally's theme for the year, in our globe, in our community, in ourselves. And I think we must remember, as Janine said, you know, let's not look outward, let's look inward as well. There will be people who are on this event tonight who are in abusive situations, and we must remember to support those within Rotary as well as those within our community. So Vaz, what an incredible topic to start the year off with. When I was serving in the police force, I was a domestic violence officer, and you're absolutely right, Janine, when I joined, there was very few police women. I was 18 when I joined, and it was all about women and children, and about you going out to those domestic violence incidents and talking people round. And gosh, how that has changed and how policing changes. And thankfully, the world has changed. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to Vaz for pulling everything together. And please, if you've got any questions that you want to pose, I'm sure, Les, the information that you have, you will share with us, and we'll make the video available. Thanks for being with us tonight, and take care. Thanks very much indeed.